Everyone, welcome to Approach to Economy. In this video, we are going to discuss how to approach your preparation for UPSC Civil Service Prelims for the subject of economy. So, keep in mind that this is specifically for prelims, strategy for prelims, and how to answer questions on prelims, what UPSC expects, how you have to study, everything will be discussed in this video. My name is Shailesh Bhupalam and I am a faculty at Insights IAS Bangalore. I teach economy and current affairs at Insights IAS. So let us begin with our analysis of economy. In this slide you can see number of economy questions by year. That means in each particular year how many questions are coming from economy I've just given in this slide. I've also drawn a trend line here. You can see this trend line, approximately 15 questions on an average per year you can see from economy. And in this analysis, I have not taken the questions that are coming from government schemes which are factual in nature. If you consider that also, the average will increase to approximately 18 to 20 questions per year. So basically, you can expect somewhere between 15 to 18 questions on an average from economy each year in UPSC prelims. Now, can we say that next year there will definitely be this many questions? No. No. In one of the year you can see that there were 10 questions. In another year there were 22 questions. So if you consider schemes, there were 30 questions also in one of the year. So basically, what we can say for sure is approximately we can take this figure somewhere 15 to 18 questions on an average we can expect. So you can also see a slight declining trend here. You cannot take this trend on face value. That means just because so far the trend is declining, the next year you cannot say there will be less number of questions. You can see here from 2012 to 2013 there is an increasing trend. From 2014 to 2015 again, if you take this short-term trend, there is increase. So basically we cannot say that there will be increase or decrease, but we can have an approximate figure somewhere between, you can say 15 to 18 or even 20 questions we can expect from economy. So see, out of 100 questions, a successful candidate, how many questions do you think a successful candidate would answer out of 100 questions? That means answer them right. If 60 questions if you answer right, and if you don't answer any of the other questions at all, you'll get 120 marks, and that is sufficient for you to clear prelims. In the last 10 years or even before that, in the last 10 years actually cutoff has never reached 120. So considering negative, also consider 70 questions you have to answer, and even in this 70 questions, if about 80 to 20 questions are from economy, that is approximately one fourth to one third. That means it is a huge chunk of prelims score that you can get using economy. Coming to the next slide. So syllabus for prelims as per UPSC notification. Here I've just given exactly what UPSC has given in the notification. Here you can see only 4 lines of syllabus they have given in the notification. Economic and social development, sustainable development. Here you can see both of the aspects are related to development. Poverty, inclusion, demographic, social sector issue. This is all that they have given, but this is not sufficient for us to understand exactly what UPSC is expecting. But some things we can infer from the syllabus that they have given. You can see here economic and social development. So you have to understand here that there is a difference between studying economy and studying Indian economy from the perspective of UPSC Civil Service Prelims. Here you have to keep the syllabus in mind and only stick to this. You are not expected to become an economist, you are expected to become a civil servant who is a generalist, unlike a specialist. A generalist civil servant is only expected to understand the advice given by economists, not become an economist himself. You don't need to know the technical details of all the economic aspects, but you should be able to understand the advice given by economists, and you should be able to take decisions based on those. So for that you need to have a broad understanding, and here it is not just economics that we are studying, how economy is related to social development. That means purely economic decisions sometimes will not lead to good social outcomes. So we are juxtaposing. For instance, we are bringing together economy and society, and then we are studying them together. So this is what they mean when in syllabus specifically they mention economic and social development. Our objective is not just economic development. Through economic development, we have to achieve social development. And while we are at it, while we are achieving the social development, we should not forget about sustainability or the environment. So it is a fine line that we are walking. It is the you might have heard about the great Indian rope trick. So it is a balance between, on one side, development of society, on the other side, maintaining sustainability and yet achieving economic growth, or you can say development. That is what we are trying to achieve here. So this is what we can infer from what UPSC has given in these two lines of syllabus. And how do we, when we are achieving this economic development, on keeping in mind both of them, we have to ensure we eradicate poverty and focus on inclusion. Inequality is a increasing concern in recent times, so focus on inclusion here means including the disadvantaged sections of society into this development process. Demographics, in NCERTs you will study about this demographics. Demographics basically means the population structure of a country. How many people are old, how many people are young. You might have heard of the term demographic dividend. That means in India currently the number of people who are young and in working age are higher compared to people who are older. This gives us a unique advantage. So basically when we study demographics, it has a direct link with development. That is why we are studying demographics also as a part of economy. Here by now you would have understood that our primary focus here is development which is socially relevant and sustainable. That is actually for this development, whatever is relevant in economy, that part is what we study. Economy is actually a very large subject, out of which we are not studying everything. We are only our relevance for civil service exam is very small part of economics, and that is whatever is related to development process. Finally, how we are going to achieve this development, which is sustainable and also socially relevant, using some government interventions. These are what I called as schemes, government schemes. So these are social sector initiatives. This is what UPSC prelims syllabus tells us. So this is what they have given as syllabus, but I have made, you can say, a breakage of the syllabus based on the number of questions they've asked in the last 10 years. This is, you can say, the breakage. I've just put it in a diagram here so that it's easy to understand which one is more important here. Macroeconomics basically means, in 12th standard macroeconomic textbook, some basic concepts are there. The first few chapters, like inflation, national income, all these questions, if you see in the last 10 years, 36 questions have come from this macroeconomics. And next is banking and monetary policy. Actually, these two things are taken together in many aspects, but I've just separated them. And if you take them together, actually, this is the biggest part. So macroeconomics, you can say it will include some aspect of fiscal policy also. So these two are interrelated. So basically macroeconomics, banking, monetary policy, fiscal policy, this is a big chunk of economy for prelims. If you know these parts thoroughly, you will be able to answer, you can say if 20 questions are there, you'll be able to answer 5 to 6 questions easily from this alone. If you know the factual aspect of schemes, factual aspect of schemes means this year or last 2 to 3 years, whichever schemes have been released by Government of India, in PIB they release schemes, or Insights we release a schemes document before prelims. In Insights IAS website you can find it. If you study these schemes properly, 1 or 2 questions every year will be asked from these schemes. So basically you can see here the breakup of which topics are more important using this, and based on this you can prioritize your preparation for prelims. So you cannot leave any basic macroeconomic concept, and banking monetary policy concept is also very important, and then schemes. International institutions is somewhat a hybrid, you can say, a topic between international relations and economy, but nevertheless you have to study it. Considering economic international institutions like IMF and World Bank and WTO, only those things also, huge number of questions come from international institutions. But the type of questions they are asking are not, you can say, conceptual in nature. They're somewhat factual in nature. Where is the headquarters of this institution? Who releases which type of a report? So and such, so on and so forth. That sort of question. If you read previous year's questions, you'll be able to understand what type of you can say international institution related questions are coming up. And then development, you know, about inclusive growth and you know, development of tribals, development of poor or particular regional inequalities, and such questions are also coming up in prelims. Investment, how to bring investment, and some institutions related to investment, FDI, FII, FPI, these aspects also carry some weight. Industry, agriculture, and planning are traditional. These are all traditional topics with regard to, you know, economy. In any textbook, they will have a separate chapter for all this, but they are not as important as these major parts. But nevertheless, you still have to study. In 10 years, if approximately you can see here 10 questions are there, that means on an average there will definitely be one question on agriculture, one question on industry, investments, and such. So basically, you have to make sure that you will study these. But some aspects are there. This unnamed portion is actually miscellaneous aspect. I couldn't you know, type the name here because it is long. But capital markets and miscellaneous aspects, you can say very less questions are there. On an alternate years, there will be one question on capital market. So, but still, it is better to know because it is not a very difficult topic. Once you know it, if you get that question right, you will be at an advantage compared to others. So, basically, this is how division between topics based on questions is there in UPSC CSE prelims. So this diagram will help you understand where you have to prioritize your time. Imagine in capital markets there is some topic which you do not understand. Can you spend you can say, you know, 3 to 4 days just to trying to understand that topic? No, you can just directly skip it because hardly there are 5 questions from capital market. The probability that this topic will come in capital market is low. The probability that this capital market related question will come in prelims itself is 50%. That means one question will come, and that too 50% probability. So you don't need to spend so much time on it. However, if there is a topic or concept which you do not understand from macroeconomics, you will have to study it because the probability that it will come up in prelims is very high. So this way you need to prioritize your preparation. You cannot give equal importance to each and every topic in you know, in the syllabus, because the syllabus is extremely vast. The only shortcut that I have seen so far in my last 10 years of experience with UPSC CSE is prioritization. Focus your energies on what is most important, and this way you can get ahead of the curve. So coming to next slide, types of questions usually seen in prelims. So I've just based on my analysis, I've just divided the questions into various types. But before that, I want to tell you that in prelims, largely there are no factual questions from, you can say, concept point of view. Whatever you study in textbooks, NCERT books, largely there are no factual questions from this area. But from current affairs, imagine some particular international agency is in news from current affairs, they will ask factual questions with regard to that. And from schemes, recently finance ministry announced you know, particular plethora of measures to come out of COVID crisis, COVID induced economic crisis, you could say. With regard to that, you should know factual aspects. So other than this, if it is with regard to, you can say, concept that you study in textbooks and standard books, they're not asking much you know, factual aspect. I cannot say that there will never be any factual question. 80% of the time it is you can say conceptual question, 20% of the time it is factual question in this you can say other than schemes and current affairs. So now we'll see classification that I've done. One is terminology based question. Terminology, as the name suggests, terminology means the name. You should be able to understand what a particular term in economics means. For instance, there is balance of payment, balance of trade, there is inflation, reflation, deflation, there is exchange rate, there is effective exchange, real effective exchange rate. All these are terms in economics. They may seem like gibberish when you hear them for the first time, but once you understand these terms, this is the language of economics, this is a jargon. Once you understand the language of economics, it is only a matter of time before you understand the concept. So in economics, these are the building blocks. These are the bricks using which you build your concepts in your mind. So if you do not understand terminology, they have taken this as a testing measure. If you don't understand particular terminology, that means your concept is not good. This is what UPSC is assuming. That is why they're asking a lot of terminology based questions. So make sure whenever you see a new term in any government documents that you are reading, in any textbook that you are studying, in NCERT book, in newspapers, find what is the exact meaning of this term and write it down in your notes. So this will help you a lot because every year there are some questions which are based on terminology. So that is one type of question. Coming to second type, basic understanding based type of questions. That means these are basic concepts. This is a part of core economy since a long time, since 50s, 100 years. So everybody who have studied economics knows about these things. So you should know some basics. You should know why inflation should be at a particular level. What happens when inflation becomes too much or it is too low, it goes to negative. So basically, here basic understanding base means if you have understood economy properly, you will be able to answer this question. You don't need to memorize anything to answer these questions. If you have just understood it, if you are reading newspaper and an article comes on economy and you understand that article, you'll be able to answer these questions also. That means whatever basic building blocks and basic concept of economy are there, if you know them, then you'll be able to answer these questions. So in general, whoever attends my classes, they'll be able to definitely answer basic understanding based questions very easily, and terminology based questions also mostly. In classes, we may not be able to cover all the terminology because some new terminology is always used in the next budget or the next economic survey just before the exam, which we'll cover mostly in economic survey classes. But then there may be terminology which we miss in newspapers that you have to cover it on your own. But basic understanding based, I can tell for sure that you'll be able to answer all these questions. Interrelations questions also you'll be able to answer if you have attended any class or even if you have studied a book thoroughly from the basics. That means from NCERTs to standard books, if you have thoroughly studied these two things, you will not miss. Interrelation basically means what happens to one variable when another is affected. For example, when prices increase, quantity demanded of a product will reduce. For example, if mango price becomes from 50 to 150 rupees, instead of buying 5 kg, you buy only 3 kg. Similarly, when inflation increases, what happens to exchange rate? So when balance of payments crisis is there, what happens to something else? When GDP decreases, what happens to investments? These are interrelations on different variables. That means what happens to one thing when something else is affected. This is once you have a basic understanding of terminology and concepts, you will understand interrelations, how each of these concepts are related. So how external economy is linked to internal economy, how monetary and fiscal policy are related, on all such things you'll be able to understand. This is interrelations. So once you build the concepts, understand the terminology, then only you'll be able to understand interrelations between them. So first you have to focus on these two and then you'll come to this. But by the time you have completed the syllabus once properly, then you'll be familiar with terminology and basic understanding, and then you can start forming these interrelations in your mind. Second time and third time, these interrelations get cemented in your mind properly and you'll be able to recall them easily whenever you want. Whenever you see that multiple choice questions, you'll be able to recall the interrelations and you'll be able to answer the question. And then there is the next type, that is trend based question. I've given an example of all these questions. We'll get to that. Here I'm just explaining what are these types. Trend based means there are some particular trends about whether GDP is increasing or decreasing, inflation is increasing or decreasing. What is the current trend? Imports are increasing or decreasing? Which are the top 5 importing countries, top 5 exporting countries to India? All these things are trends. These trends are usually given in economic data. In mostly these trends are asked from economic survey, which is released every year just before the budget. So these trends you should know. Some major trends at least you should know. Based on these trends, usually the trends they are asking is directly coming from current affairs or whatever government reports are released in that particular year, like economic survey, budget and such things. So that is trend based question. These are also common. So if you are aware of the major trends that are released in this particular, hardly there are 10 to 20 major trends which if you are aware, you'll be able to answer this trend based question. And coming to current affairs based question, this is somewhat factual in nature. Some particular scheme is released, or finance ministry does something. RBI recently does some changes in policy. So all these are current affairs. So finance ministry does some regulatory changes. All this will come under current affairs. Government releases a new scheme for women, or some new money is released as a stimulus package into the economy. All these come under government schemes. So these current affairs and government schemes are, you can say, factual in nature, and you should remember these facts. And this part is purely conceptual in nature. Even if you don't remember, if you understand these things, you will be able to answer. Trend based and terminology based are a mix of facts and concept, because terminology you have to remember the term and then link it to the concept. Trend based, you should remember the concept and then link to the fact, that is what are the current trend. So basically these are a mix of both. So these are the types of questions based on my analysis of papers. And there is one thing I wanted to make clear to the students who are starting preparation with, for UPSC. It is not economics that we study for UPSC, it is Indian economy. That means, like I already, to reiterate what I said earlier, it is not, you don't have to study the complete economics to clear UPSC civil service. You'll never need to know all the concepts of economics. What we need to know are basic fundamentals based on which we'll be able to understand expert advice and take decisions accordingly. And based on that, UPSC has given syllabus. If you look at main syllabus actually, which is beyond the scope of this video, but still go through the UPSC main syllabus, once you'll come to understand that UPSC wants you to think beyond economics. Even in Indian economy, they are trying to link it to, you can say, society on one side, ecology on the other, disasters on one side. So basically how economy is impacted from all these things and how economy can help all these things in turn, this is what we have to understand. So that means economy is not the only variable based on which an officer will take decision. There will be various other aspects also. And in that sense, you have to be able to see the big picture, which includes the economic aspects. So broad understanding of economic aspects is what is important for those who are aspiring to become civil servants. That is first thing you have to remember when you are studying economics. Balance between economy and ecology, which we already saw, which is visible in the syllabus itself. That means how can we focus on economic growth without destroying our natural capital? That means without destroying our ecological balance, how can we develop economy? Balance between economy and society. That means how can we focus on economic growth and at the same time don't create severe inequalities in society. So social fabric or social stability should be maintained. People in poverty should be brought out. Extreme inequality should not be created, and yet economic growth has to happen. This is the crux of what is necessary for Indian economy. And beyond the scope of this, whatever is there in prelims and main syllabus, only that part is important. Other than that, you don't need to get into technical details of all the topics in economy. That is not important for us. So this is the crux. There are some aspects which are remotely relevant to this, which are important because they are in current affairs or government has spoken about them, released them in their press releases or reports. But other than that, core aspect of what is important for UPSC economy is this. Coming to some inferences for economy. Most questions expect a broad view, not intricate details, which this part we have already addressed this part. That means you need to have a broad understanding. With a good understanding, 70% of the questions can be answered. That means, like I already said, factual aspect is not as important compared to conceptual aspect. If you understand the concepts, you will be able to answer 70% of the questions easily. You don't need to focus too much on, can say, memorization. There are other subjects where memorization is also important. Here also, I'm not saying that you don't need to memorize anything. There are some things which are factual in nature which you need to memorize. But compared to other subjects, say history, for example, you need to know a lot of facts in history. Compared to that, this is somewhat conceptual in nature. There will be some questions which are designed to be very difficult. They shouldn't affect us. So coming to this part, So this part is very important here. Imagine you're doing your own analysis of last 10 years prelims papers, and you find a question and you think, how can I answer this question? And you find that I have to read some report that is released by Government of India, which is 800 pages long. Only if you read that report, you'll be able to answer this question. Does that mean that you have to read every single report released by Government of India? Then you have to make a 5-year plan to clear UPSC, and even then it is going to be difficult, because it is not humanly possible for anyone to be able to do that and then you can say remember everything that they have studied and then answer the paper. Some questions are deliberately inserted into the paper so that nobody answers them. That is why this is a low scoring exam. Nobody gets 200 out of 200 in prelims, and it is not expected also. The best we have to target 120. There is no point getting 180, 200 also. You will still clear prelims, but that extra effort that you need to get 180 instead of 120 is humongous. And with that, actually you can focus on clearing mains and do something else instead of, you can say, it is an overkill. You don't need to do that. So basically there are some questions which you need to recognize that whatever I do, I'll not be able to answer this question. It is like, imagine you're playing cricket. It is a bouncer. You have to leave that ball. You try to hit that ball, you may get out. So basically you try to answer this question, you may get a negative mark. And you try to prepare for this question, it may waste a lot of your time. If you don't recognize these questions and you try to answer, try to think on how to answer all the 100 questions, then you're in trouble. Basically you have to identify that 10 to 15 questions in the paper which are designed for you can say making the paper difficult, overall increasing the difficulty level of the paper and keeping the cutoff at a comfortable level. That is why UPSC does it. It shouldn't affect us. What is important for us is answering that 70 to 80 questions only. Leave these 20 questions which are extremely difficult to answer. This is an inference not only for economy, for other subjects also. But in economy, if 20 questions are coming up, there are 2 to 3 questions which will be extremely difficult and which you will not be able to answer regardless of what you study. But that should not affect either your preparation or your strategy in answering prelims questions. If it does, then you are deviating from what is required to clear the exam. So remember this. And this is very important. We will reiterate in classes and in test series and when we are discussing tests, all these things in strategy sessions also. But this is one thing you have to remember when you are analyzing the paper and when you're analyzing your own performance also. You cannot beat yourself up saying that I did not answer these 10 to 15 questions. So that will not change your performance. What is most important is those questions which everybody else answered but you couldn't answer, or those questions which you knew and yet couldn't answer because you did not read the question properly, or you're under pressure and you misunderstood the question, you misconstrued a statement given there. These are what will make a difference between clearing prelims and not clearing prelims. That is what you have to work on. So keep that in mind. Coming to the last point, we need to develop the skill of intelligent guessing to be able to clear prelims with certainty. So you can clear prelims even without this skill also, but you cannot be sure until you write prelims. That means you will be under a lot of stress in your exam hall. You will have a very good knowledge. You may clear prelims also, but you will not be very sure. But there is a way where even before you get into the exam hall, you will know for sure that you will clear prelims. We can say this because I have written 5 prelims. I've cleared all of them. There are people at Insights, we are mentors and faculty who score 140, 150 in prelims. This is because, not because we know more than everybody else. It is because we have learned the skill of intelligent guessing. That means we have sufficient residual knowledge based on what we read and in newspapers and the same standard books, and using this knowledge we should be able to guess whether this could be correct or not. I don't know whether this is correct or not. Imagine there is a scheme, a particular government scheme is there, and they have given 4 options. What does this scheme do? Based on the name of the scheme, I can come up with, you can say 60 to 70% probability is there that I can come up with I can come up with a solution here. There is a good probability. That means I can eliminate other options and because I know the name of all the most of the other government schemes. There are thousands of schemes which I've studied over the years, and I can identify how government of India names the schemes, and I'll probably think intuitively that this is probably, you know, in line with how government of India names the schemes. I'll look at another option. I'll think that this is not how government of India names the schemes. I may not always be correct with intelligent guessing, but if I answer 10 questions, if I'm able to get 6 to 7 answers correct in these 10 questions, then I'm already answering them with huge amount of success. So if you're even getting say 5 answers correct out of 10, even then you can say overall you're getting positive. This does not happen overnight. You should answer multiple choice questions on a daily basis for a long time, for 4 to 6 months consistently. You have to answer say around 25 to 50 questions a day. Then your mind will start thinking subconsciously what could be the correct answer, and you will arrive at the correct answer even without knowing the necessary information to answer that question based on other information that you know. So this is a skill. When I say it is a skill, it is like any other skill. Cycling is a skill, swimming is a skill. You can read any number of books about swimming. Can you get better at swimming by reading any book on swimming? No. You have to swim, and the more number of hours you spend on swimming, the better you get at swimming. Similarly, the more number of questions you solve, multiple choice questions you solve on a daily basis, you get better at solving multiple choice questions. And there is an intricacy here that I want you to understand. See, you want to learn swimming. Imagine two people want to learn swimming, and one person he practices in a single day for 10 hours. Another person practices it, half an hour a day for 20 days. Which person do you think is better at swimming after 20 days? It is the second person who practice half an hour a day, because uh, based on my understanding, whatever I have studied, literature that I have studied, newspapers and some online resources, when you want to develop a skill, usually the skill is developed when we are sleeping. That means when there is a time gap between, you know when you practice the skill today and then tomorrow. When you sleep between these two practice sessions, your skill gets developed during sleep time. If you think that okay, just before prelims I'll solve 10,000 questions in 10 days and I'll be I'll be good to go. It does not happen like that. The more spaced your practice with the skill is, that means every day if you are answering only 25 questions for a long period of time, you will be much better at developing this skill rather than trying to cram everything at once, because in any development of skill this is very important. So you can check your own tips and tricks as it is, but I'm just giving you what I have learned over the years, so that will be helpful for you. Coming to books to be referred, this is a very common question among all my students, even who ask me outside also. For economy, NCERTs are most important. Except microeconomics, read all NCERTs from 9th to 12th standard. These are your number one resource, the most important resource that you have. Usually UPSC will, what is in the mind of UPSC is to make it easy for everyone to be able to clear the exam. That means whether they are rural students, urban students, English medium or Hindi medium, Kannada, Telugu medium, it shouldn't matter. That means they are trying to create a level playing field for everyone. And if that is what they're trying to do, then they have to ask questions from a common resource which is available free for everyone, and that is one, NCERTs, second is newspaper. So that is indeed, is in this context that NCERTs are important. You may think that it is silly and I've already studied NCERTs in my 11th and 12th, in my 9th and 10th, I don't need to read them again. But if you think that, then you'll be in trouble. Basically NCERTs should be your number one resource. Second, you can choose a textbook. Ramesh Singh is commonly referred textbook. If you are comfortable with some other textbook, or if you're attending in Insights will provide you can say class notes. Basically, if you are not having access to that, you can study any textbook properly for both prelims and mains, but keep only one textbook. Along with NCERT, there should only be one textbook. Other miscellaneous resources are there which are important. Economic survey, you'll not be able to understand immediately if you start economic survey, but Once you have understood all the concepts in NCRTs and Ramesh Singh, then you will be able to understand what economic survey is saying. Even then there will be some terminology and some trends which you will not understand, which you have to Google and then identify what actually they are talking about. But still they are important because government releases them every year and UPSC asks questions from them every year. Yojana, based on the trends that we have seen on how questions are coming, Yojana is an important resource. It is a monthly magazine released by Government of India itself. So I would recommend both for prelims and mains that you read Yojana. Another Kurukshetra is there. It is not mandatory that you read it, but Yojana I would say is a mandatory resource that you have to read, both for prelims and mains, because the number of questions that are coming directly from Yojana is increasing every year. So this is with regard to sources. This is only, you can say, mostly it covers static, and this covers some part of current affairs. But you should have your own current affairs source. For current affairs source, if you are reading monthly magazine, for example, Insights on India website releases monthly magazine every month. Along that can be your source along with newspaper. Along with newspaper, keep one monthly magazine, and that is sufficient for you to be able to clear prelims. And please don't get into reading fat books like Dattan Sundaram, Mishra and Puri, Uma Kapila. These books are, if you look at the book, each book is more than 1 kg. That means they are big fat books which you do not need for UPS. So maybe earlier, UPS used to ask questions like this, but they no longer ask questions from this. If you just read one textbook, that is Ramesh Singh, or whichever you're comfortable with, whatever, it should be written according to syllabus. So if you are reading coaching notes, other than coaching notes, I would recommend Ramesh Singh itself. So these books are not necessary. Some people may say that you have to read them, but in my opinion, they are not necessary for you to clear prelims. Or even for mains for that matter, you don't need to read them. Coming to how to make notes. So in making notes is extremely important aspect of clearing both prelims and mains at once. For prelims, there is one thing you have to remember between prelims and mains. Prelims is the recognition test. That means the answer is right in front of you. There are 4 options. You have to just choose one option among them. So because it is right in front of you, you don't, some people, even if they've studied or heard it once in the class, they'll be able to recognize it. Worst case scenario, if you revise it 2 to 3 times, you'll be able to easily recognize it from the answers. But mains is a different game altogether because it is a recall test. You will not have answer in front of you. No matter how smart you are, you will not get all the details, all the facts, all the information necessary to put forth a sound argument to the examiner in your answer if you have not done proper revision. 5 to 10 times of revision has to be done to be able to write extremely good answers in mains. And if you have to do revision, imagine you have studied 4 or 5 books for economy and everything is segregated in all these books. Is it possible to revise 5 books for economy for mains? After prelims, they will have hardly 90 days, 90 to 100 days. For economy, if you have to revise these 5 books 5 times, economy is one subject in mains. There are overall 10 to 15 subjects that you have to study. It is impossible. That is where making notes comes in. It is the most important aspect. If you start making notes integrated in an integrated manner for static and current affairs both, that is the best option. I'm talking about ideal scenario here. You can say you can modify it according to how much effort you are willing to put in or how many hours you have to put in, all these things. But ideal scenario is you have to be able to integrate static and current affairs. And coming to the last point, there has to be a single notes for a given topic. If you have fragmented notes, imagine you have 4 notes for a particular topic, you can say monetary policy. Before prelims or even before mains, you will not be able to revise all these fragmented notes and then go to the exam hall. In fact, when you look at all these notes, it will be intimidating. Imagine 3 days is there for prelims and you want to revise for monetary policy itself. There is 4 notes, and for each topic there are so many notes, and you'll feel like giving up. You'll feel like, oh, so much is there, I'll not be able to finish it. But if you have a single notes for, imagine instead of 4 you have single notes for monetary policy. Once you read that notes, you will get that sense of confidence that whatever question comes from monetary policy, I will be able to answer it, because everything that I have studied in monetary policy is right here in this notes, and I have it in my hand. So that kind of confidence you only get when you integrate everything you study into a single notes. I mean, when I say everything, I mean everything here. That means imagine in class, you hear a class about monetary policy, you write it down. And then you read something from NCERT books, you add it there itself. I usually recommend people to make these notes online, because you can just copy and paste from NCERT books, copy and paste from Ramesh Singh, copy and paste from newspapers, everything at one place, copy paste from Insights Daily Current Affairs. So if everything is at one place, the kind of confidence and the kind of difference it makes, as as the exam comes closer and closer, is completely different. This we have all experienced. But if you are not written the exam, then you would not have experienced the difference that it makes. That is why I'm just giving this as a, you can say, tip to you before you start preparation. You should have a single notes. Simple and macro level facts are important in economics answers for mains. But for prelims, like I said, 80% of the time they are not factual. Questions are not factual in nature, and but I would recommend that you start remembering some basic facts for during your prelims preparation itself, and it will help you in mains. It may help you to eliminate some options in prelims also. It may not directly help you, but for mains it will definitely help you. So it is not necessary for you to remember facts for prelims, but it is advisable. Coming to how to make notes. When you are making notes, you have to keep some space in your note, especially if you are making notes offline. If you're making it in offline, I would recommend that you do it in papers, so that you can add pages later, so that your notes does not become fragmented. It should be a unified whole. That means if you take a particular syllabus point, everything related to that syllabus point should be at one place. If you write a test and the solutions of the test mention some extra point with regard to this, you have to bring it back to this notes and write it there. And then you'll feel that all your energies are being focused back into this notes, and that notes is with you, and you'll be able to bring it to the exam hall. Whatever you do, think of this. Will this help me in the exam hall? If it does not help you in the exam hall, then you're just wasting your time, because your effort is diffused. It is not focused, it is diffused. If it is diffused, then any number of thousands of hours that you spend is going to go waste, because it is not going to come with you to the exam hall. This you remember. How can you focus your effort? Making a single notes, bring everything together, revising these notes 10 times. That is the simplest strategy and most effective strategy for clearing UPSC prelims. Coming to for economics in particular, subject is logical and simple. It is actually not a difficult subject, but there is a but here. Students who have zero background in it, like myself, I did not have any background before coming into UPSC. I prepared, but because since 10 years we are doing this, now we are very comfortable with the economy. But when I started, I felt the difficulty, which I think is one of the reasons why I got better at teaching economy, because I understand the challenge that students face if they have zero background in economics. So students will face a challenge in the beginning, because it will take some time for them to understand concepts and keep it in their mind. Today it will feel like you understood it. Tomorrow when you open the book again, you will feel blank, that I'm not able to remember exactly what this is. So that will happen in the initial few days, and it is natural. Don't worry about it. But you have to make sure your effort is consistent. If your effort is not consistent, then this challenge will get you. You have to get to the challenge, and you have to overcome this challenge, and it should not deter you from putting further efforts. After a few days, it will become comfortable. Think of it like riding a bicycle. Initial days it is hard, but once you learn it, nobody can make you forget riding a bicycle. So initially, all your attempts, there will be resistance, but there is this steep progress at particular time. This will come after 1 or 2 months of continuously putting your efforts on economy. There you will start making good progress. Here you'll start understanding, okay, Now I'm able to understand. Now I'm able to interlink all the concepts. Now I'm able to see the bigger picture, how this whole thing happens. And then at one point, you'll start feeling comfortable about the whole subject, and you'll start linking it with other aspects. How a particular disaster affects the economy, like COVID crisis or some cyclone. How a political decision affects the economy, like demonetization or something else. How migration affects the economy, how demography. So all the other subjects with regard to economy, it will come only after you have reached a very good level of understanding in economy itself. So this is what is important in UPSC. You should be in UPSC. You're expected to take a decision. Imagine you're a district collector. You're expected to take a decision based on all the factors combined together. In your college, in your schools, you would have split the decision: science, social science, and economics separately. Polity separately. All these things we have divided these subjects for our own convenience. But the world does not work that way. The world is an organic whole. If you take one decision at one place, it affects everything. So here you have to understand, the first step is how economy itself is a jigsaw puzzle. How internal economy affects external economy, how inflation affects exchange rate. So everything affects everything else in economy. Once you understand that, then you will understand how other subjects affect economy and economy affects other subjects. So this is how you'll be able to take good decisions as an administrator. If imagine the responsibility that district collector will have with regard to the decision that they'll take. So I will just give you a small example. Consider Kudankulam nuclear power plant was being installed in a particular district in Tamil Nadu. It is Russia was building this, and imagine you're a district collector of this. Imagine the width of knowledge that you need to have to be able to take a particular decision. A lot of people come to the power plant and they start a strike, start a movement against. This happened actually a few years ago, and then you come to realize that this NGO which is going against this nuclear power plant because of safety issues that they are citing is funded by USA. USA was a competitor in this bid to build this Kudankulam nuclear power plant, but Russia won this bid and now they are building it. So basically, you understand that this is international relations, that US and Russia are competitors since a long time. They have fought a Cold War. So all these things is IR. And then you understand, you see how it will affect the local economy, because the Kudankulam nuclear power plant is going to reduce the cost of power, because nuclear power is a little cheaper compared to coal power. How electricity cost will reduce overall price of production and price of consumption also. So basically, this is going to reduce inflation, increase disposable income. This is the economic aspect. You should be able to understand safety aspects, which is scientific in nature. You should be able to answer how a nuclear reactor works. So what is pressurized heavy water reactor? This is science and technology aspect. I'm just trying to give you an example of how each decision will entail international relations, science and technology, economics, polity. A lot of things are there here in a single decision. It is not that you learn something and then you work in silos. Everything is organic and integrated when you are taking decisions. And to reach that level, this is the beginning. You start understanding terminology, concepts, and interrelations with other concepts, and then only you'll be able to understand interrelations with other subjects. So this is a learning curve, and initially it is going to feel difficult, but if you keep at it, you'll be able to solve this problem. You'll be able to, you can say, get good at this over a period of time. Coming to some questions. So these are some previous year's questions. So this is an example for a trend-based question. Trend-based means based on a particular factual trend also you should know, and some concepts also you should know, like I said. Now look at this question. It is a relatively difficult question, so keep in mind. India has experienced persistent and high food inflation in the recent past. You should know what is inflation. Food inflation basically means in food articles there is consistently increasing prices in the recent past. Experience persistent means continuously increasing and very high food inflation in the recent past. What could be the reasons? So they have given three reasons here, which statements are correct. Due to gradual switchover to the cultivation of commercial crops, area under cultivation of food grains has steadily decreased in the last 5 years by about 30%. So the statement 1 is a trend. So here trend says we are shifting cultivation from food crops to commercial crops. And because we are shifting, and 30% shift has happened in the last 5 years, which is a trend. And if you don't know about the trend of how much food crops are grown, how much commercial crops are grown, or how it is changing, then it will be difficult to answer this question. But if you have answered these questions based on if you have a good hold on answering multiple choice questions, then in general, if you look at any trends, usually a trend will be somewhat like this. That means you cannot see a steady increase or steady decrease anywhere. They have given steadily, which is somewhat in overall 5 years, nothing is steady in any economy. Even this is also, it is unlikely that it is steady. We cannot say for sure because we don't know what exactly is the trend. And in 5 years, is it possible to change 30%? 30% of cropping pattern change in 5 years is extremely huge, which is also unlikely. I would answer based on these two things because I have sufficient experience in answering multiple choice questions. I would say one is wrong. If one is wrong, I will eliminate A, C, and D. Only B will remain. But imagine I don't know this trend I'm not sure about. Then read the second and third question. Statement. As a consequence of increasing incomes, the consumption patterns of the percentage of people have undergone a significant change. So this is true because in newspaper I've read about protein inflation. Protein inflation basically means because people are getting their incomes are increasing, and under PDS we are giving them rice at 1 rupee per kg, wheat at 2 rupees per kg. They have extra disposable income. They have extra money. Using this money, they are buying milk and chicken and other meat. This is increasing the prices of milk, meat and chicken. So that is increasing incomes, changing the consumption patterns, and increasing the prices of other products. So this is true because in current affairs we have read about this. The food supply chain has structural constraints. This is also true in food processing industry, in agriculture, in main syllabus. You will read about this in static part directly itself. So 2 and 3 should be correct. So 2 and 3 are correct in both 2 and 3 are correct in two options. If you do not know whether one is true or false, at least you have eliminated 2 because both of the options are true. If you have read static part here, current affairs here, this is current affairs related, this is static related. If you know, if you have studied properly, even if you don't know this trend, which is somewhat difficult to know, still you can eliminate 2 options. If you eliminate 2 options, I would recommend that you answer this question. Depends upon, over a period of time you'll evolve your own strategy, but you can begin with answering all the questions where you eliminate 2 options at least. With eliminating 1 option only, you cannot answer the question, but with eliminating 2 options, you can answer the question to begin with. So in this, the answer is 2 and 3 only. With the government can take devaluing domestic currency. So here we are looking at will increase the exports. Devaluation will definitely increase the exports, and when more exports will happen, more foreign currency will flow into the country, which will reduce current account deficit. Similarly, increase in export subsidy will also increase exports, which is good for foreign currency flow into the country, and that will help reduce CAD. Similarly, adopting suitable policies which attract greater FDI is going to increase exports, which is also good for reducing CAD. So answer is A, that is 1, 2, and 3. Coming to the next question, which is terminology based. This is a simple question. A rapid increase in the rate of inflation is sometimes attributed to base effect. So this is a terminology based question also, and in 2011 it was a current affairs based question also, because based on base effect there was a high inflation. So if you know what is the meaning of base effect, you'll be able to answer this question. If you don't know what is the terminology, what is the meaning of the term base effect, it is difficult to answer this question. If the options are simple, that means you can eliminate others, then only you can answer. Otherwise it is somewhat difficult. So this terminology based questions you should be able to answer if you have read the term properly in current affairs. So impact of price levels of previous year and the calculation of inflation rate, this is the exact definition of base effect. So if you know that, then you will be able to answer. So here answer is C, you can see that. Correlation based means, like I said, how one variable affects the other variable. Here you can see if the interest rate is decreased in an economy, how it will affect decrease in consumption expenditure in the economy. If interest rate is decreased, actually more loans will be taken and consumption expenditure will increase. So A is wrong in that. Increase the tax collection of the government. So possibly, but we cannot be sure. Increase the investment expenditure in the economy, more probable. Increase total savings in the economy. So C is among B, C and D, C is more probable here because savings rate will depend upon other things. Tax collection will depend upon whether more production will happen. After investment is done, then only production will happen. This you will see in circular flow of diagram when we do it in class. But here the answer is C. But it is based on correlation here. That means interest rates are directly linked to investment, how or savings, how or tax collection, how. So if you know properly what is the link between the two, then you will be able to answer the question. These are here I've just taken some examples of some questions so that you'll be able to understand how I've classified these questions. What you should do is study basic sources. We already saw what basic sources are: NCERT books, class notes if you're attending coaching, Ramesh Singh, and then you can say Yojana, Current Affairs magazine. These are all dynamic sources like budget, economic survey. These are all dynamic sources. Other than that, these things you should study. Always keep the syllabus in mind. That means it should be your guiding force. And solve previous year's papers so that you understand the mind of UPSC. Practice solving MCQs on a daily basis. This is what is expected from a student. So whenever you are in confusion, whenever you do not know what to do, how to approach a particular subject, there are two things which will help you provide a proper, you can say, structure, and they are these two things. This syllabus on one hand, previous year's questions on the other. Syllabus and previous year questions are somewhat like a window, a peek into the mind of UPSC. What are they actually expecting? So once you know the direction, that means where you have to go. The going itself will happen by studying basic sources, solving MCQs. That means this is like, you can say, this is like the steering, and these two things are like the accelerator. Only with steering, without accelerator, you cannot go anywhere. Only with accelerator, without steering, you cannot reach your destination. Both of the things are important for you to reach your destination. You're able to understand this, right? So this is what is expected from you to be able to clear prelims. Common mistakes that most people do: too many sources. That means you'll make a list of all the sources in a sheet of paper. Even the sheet is not enough. This is what most freshers do, and they'll think that I'll study all these things, I'll revise all these things 10 times. Like I said, if you're going to do that, you're going to make a 5-year plan. Even then it is very difficult to do that. Make sure that you keep your sources limited, but revise them multiple times. If you ask any successful candidate or any candidate who failed also, they will tell you this is one of the most common mistake that people do is they diversify their sources so much that it is impossible to revise it later. This is number one mistake that you need to avoid. Second, if you underestimate NCERT books, or you think that I already know everything in NCERT books and you would skip them, is another biggest mistake that people do. Don't skip them, read them thoroughly. And third, getting very technical into some aspects, like some calculation methodology, how statistical institute does something, all these things are not necessary for UPSC. For UPSC, like I said, broad understanding of concepts is important. Don't get into technical. You're not, writing exam for Indian Economic Service. You want to get into Indian Administrative Service. Remember that always. And one of the common mistakes with regard to other subjects also, and in general, in particular economy also, is depending on one particular topper strategy. You see that somebody got first rank or 10th rank or 13th rank, and you see that okay, they have got very good score in GS3, or they have got very good score, or their economics is good, and based on that, if you follow the same strategy, it does not mean that you'll always be able to succeed. Because I'm not taking anything away from them. They are toppers because they put in a lot of effort and they have the required necessary skills and everything, and UPSC thinks so. I'm nobody to certify, but UPSC thinks so, and that is why they have cleared. But the direction that they are coming from is maybe different from yours. Take this metaphor that I've given in the screen here. Imagine there is an elephant and there are a few blind men approaching the elephant. One person comes from this direction and he thinks it is like a tree. One person comes from this direction and he thinks, this is like a wall. Another person thinks like, it is like a pillar. Another thinks it is a snake. So basically, because they're coming from different directions, their background is different and their mental makeup is different. Their skills that they have acquired throughout their education and experiences are different. Imagine they're trying to climb this, just to take this metaphor further. If he knows how to climb a tree, probably he can even climb the elephant. If he knows how to climb a wall, he can climb the elephant also. If the target is clearing UPSC civil services, people can do it in different ways. That is why if 1,000 people have cleared, they all have 1,000 different strategies to clear. It does not mean that every single strategy of every single topper will work for you. You have to understand from which direction you are coming from, and you should be able to see the elephant as a whole and then identify whether this strategy will work for you, and then only then you'll be able to understand whether it will work for me. If you depend just on one particular topper strategy, it may or may not work for you. For him it worked, for her it worked, but can we say the same for you? Not necessarily. It may work, it may not work. So keep that in mind, keep this metaphor in mind to make sure that you don't fall into the trap. But read what the toppers are saying, read what their strategy is, so that over a period of time you may get the better picture about this elephant. But if you have a mentor who can say has tried to climb this elephant multiple times from different directions and has a fair idea of how the elephant looks like, and also knows your strengths and weaknesses or where you're coming from, then you're in a you have a unique advantage of how to climb this elephant. This is a metaphor I'm trying to give you to make sure that if you depend upon one topper strategy, it may not help you. But if you know multiple topper strategies and understand exactly what is common among them or what they did right, then it may help you. But avoid this mistake of depending upon one particular topic. So remember that this is not a sprint, it is a marathon. You need to be able to give consistent efforts for a very long time, and small daily improvements are the biggest key in this particular race. You cannot cram it, you cannot do it in a month, you cannot do it in 2 months also. Over a period of time, it has to develop all the skills that are necessary to clear UPSC prelims, mains, and interview have to develop over a period of time, and make up your mind to give that consistent effort over a longer period of time to be able to clear both prelims mains at once. So this is it. Thank you for giving your time, and I hope I have contributed something to your understanding of UPSC or how to be able to clear the exam. So thank you.